So the lesson today starts with Jesus going to a land called Tyre and Sidon. And the important part to know about this region is that it's a Gentile region. And Jesus, being a Jew, is not supposed to go to Gentile regions. But the thing we know about Jesus is he doesn't always go where he's supposed to go, or say what he's supposed to say, or do what he's supposed to do, according to the world. And so we have Jesus going to this Gentile region. And this Gentile woman, a Canaanite, which was a people that had been displaced by the Jews, comes running to Jesus. And now Jesus is a part of the people that again had displaced her and her family. Someone that she probably should not associate with. But she comes running to Jesus and she says, Jesus, heal my daughter, because she's possessed by a demon. So now we find out that not only is she a Canaanite, not only is she a woman which was not held in equal regard of men at the time, but she also has a demon-possessed daughter, which means surely she has done something wrong, because demons at this time were believed to only attack people who were weak, people who were bad, people who had done something wrong. But this woman comes to Jesus, and she begs for him to heal her daughter. Now there's a similar story in Matthew, in the 8th chapter, where there's a Gentile soldier who comes to Jesus and asks for Jesus to heal his son. And Jesus does it. So you would expect, in this story, that Jesus would heal her daughter. But he doesn't. He ignores her for some reason. He ignores her, and then the disciples come because she's still screaming, and the disciples say, Jesus, send this woman away. She's bothering us. She's a hassle. We don't want to have to take care of her. Now this is also something that we've already heard. Just in the chapter before, there's a story of a crowd gathering, and the disciples come to Jesus and they say, Jesus, send away all these people. We can't feed them. We can't care for them. Send them away. But Jesus doesn't. He says, bring them to me. Gather them around. So we would expect for Jesus to again respond the same way. Say, no, we're not going to send her away. Instead, bring her to me. But he doesn't. Instead, he says, I came for the lost sheep of Israel. He tells her, in a sense, I'm not here for you. I've got nothing for you. Go away. And this woman then falls to her feet, falls on her knees to Jesus' feet and says, Lord, please help me. Surely at this point, this woman showing her humility would receive what she's asking for. But she doesn't. Instead, Jesus turns to her and says, it's not fair to take the food of the children and toss it to the dogs. What Jesus is saying is, I came to feed the children, the lost sheep of Israel, and you, a Canaanite, a woman, are a dog. And I didn't come to feed you. Now today, that's still a major insult, especially to women, to call them a female dog. There's a word for that. It's a bad word. A bad word. And I wonder which would have been more shocking, if I had actually said that word here today, or if the fact that Jesus 2,000 years ago said something of a similar thing. Now there's a lot of people that say, well, it's not exactly the same, because if you look at the Greek, it uses the diminutive, so in other words, it's like calling her a little dog. It's endearing. But I wonder, the women in this room, if you would then not be offended if I called you a little dog instead of just a dog. No, what Jesus did, what Jesus said was insulting. Now why did he say it? I don't know. A lot of people say that, well, that's the way that Gentiles were referred to. And so Jesus was just using the words of the time. Or perhaps he was saying this to test her to see how she would respond. That's not consistent with the way Jesus tested people. Jesus tested people by challenging them to do something or asking them a direct question. He didn't insult them just to see how they would respond. No, perhaps Jesus was indeed fully human and fully God. Perhaps Jesus, just like us, is susceptible to social norms, is susceptible to hearing the way that society refers to certain people. And maybe Jesus was simply responding in that way. And so we don't know exactly why Jesus said it or what he was thinking, but what we do know is how this woman responded, and that's perhaps even more shocking. She wasn't offended. She wasn't mad. She didn't try to refute him. Instead, she said, "Yes, Lord." In other words, she's saying, "Okay, Jesus, maybe I am a dog. Maybe that is what society has said that I am. But even dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the table." So in other words, she's challenging Jesus and saying, "Jesus, even you owe me at least a crumb if I am in fact a dog." And the thing about this idea of just crumbs falling is that this is following the story of the feeding. I said that Jesus gathered the people and he fed them. He had 5 loaves of bread, 2 fish, and he fed 5,000 people. And the crumbs were 12 baskets full of food. So a crumb from Jesus is not just little bits, but a whole nother feast. And so this woman is saying, "Give me a piece of that. Let me enjoy from those 12 baskets left over of crumbs that you have to share with this world." So Jesus looks at her, listens to her response of humility, of faith in these crumbs. He says, "Woman, great is your faith. Your daughter is healed." He's taken back by this. Because, again, remember, this woman is Canaanite. This woman is a pagan. This woman is a woman, and she has a daughter possessed by a demon. You can't get much lower than that at this time. This woman isn't supposed to show faith. This woman isn't supposed to show this endurance, this humility. This woman is just supposed to be lower than everyone else. Jesus notices that she, just like everybody else, is a child of God. And she, just like everybody else, deserves what Christ came to give. She deserves to feast at that table. She deserves to have her daughter healed. Because while society has said that she must have done something wrong, she sits there and says, no, I did nothing wrong by being born a woman, or by being born a Canaanite. And I did nothing wrong to deserve my daughter to be possessed by this demon. Bad things happen. But I still have faith that, Jesus, you can heal me. And so Jesus learned that these walls that society had built up needed to be broken down. He needed to be able to get to know this woman, to reach out to her, have her reach back to him, and have a moment when they can connect, when they can see each other as human beings, that Jesus can see that she too is a child of God. Now, I'd like to say that since then, all these walls have been completely destroyed and no longer exist, but we all know that's not true. There's still walls that exist between men and women. There's still walls that exist between what denomination you are, or what religion you are, or where you're from, or how much money you make. I know that I grew up with many walls around me, and I was isolated from anyone who thought or acted or looked different from me. But then I went to college and started traveling to other countries and learning about these people, and learning about their cultures and living among them. And then, as was mentioned, I went to Texas. I went to Dallas to study theology. And while there, I lived for 3 years in a house called the Bonhoeffer House. And now that I'm back in Columbia, I'm starting a community like that as well, off Decker Boulevard in Northeast Columbia. But the thing about these houses is, we don't go to necessarily fix anything. We don't go to necessarily help anybody. We go to learn. We lived in East Dallas, which is an impoverished area of Dallas, and we got to know the people. And I want to share with you 2 stories in particular for friends of mine that I met in first woman, she goes by Pocahontas. I wish I could tell you her real name, but many people on the streets, they don't tell you their real name, they just tell you what they're known by. And so she's known as Pocahontas. She had grown up on an Indian reservation in Oklahoma. All I knew about Pocahontas was that she had come from an Indian reservation. She didn't have a job. She was addicted to drugs. She suffered from mental illness. And she solicited herself as a prostitute. That's all I knew. Those are the identities that have been imposed upon me. But as I got to know her, as I sat with her, shared meals with her, spoke with her, learned about her history, I learned that when she was growing up on that Indian reservation, she was taken in by a man who was in his 40s when she was still only 8 years old. He didn't take her in as a father figure. He took her in and abused her physically, mentally, sexually. And he forced her to take drugs, to shoot up heroin at the age of 8. So she never had the opportunity to develop like everybody else. She never had the opportunities to succeed like everybody else. Those things that I told you that I knew about her are all things that had been imposed upon her from the age of 8. She didn't have a choice. These were things that had been done to her, not necessarily the things that she had done. And so then, when I looked at her, knowing her past, I didn't see those titles anymore when I first saw her. Instead, I saw her as who she was, which was a child of God, screaming out, "Help me! I have faith, but I can't do it alone. I'm not these things that people say that I am. These weren't things that I had chosen. Help me." And another man named Thomas. And Thomas was in his 30s, hadn't worked for like 6 or 7 years, was one of the most negative people I ever met in my life. Every time he came over, he had something to complain about, and if everything was going well, he made something up. And Thomas, we tried to get him to apply to jobs, but he refused. He said, "Why would I apply for a job? Any job I've ever had, I've been fired or I quit. Why would I apply for a job?" So I thought, surely he's just lazy. Surely he just doesn't care. Surely he's just going to be dependent upon other people. But I learned he actually didn't even receive any outside assistance other than a few places here and there that would help him with food. And the reason he was still on the streets, the reason he wouldn't apply to a job, is because when he grew up, he also grew up in an abusive household. And his father, who was abusive, finally his mother got up the courage to leave, but it turned out that his stepfather was also abusive. And his mother would take out her aggression on him. And so when Thomas applied for a job, he realized that he would have a boss that would tell him what he had to do. And he has had too many people in his past tell him things that he had to do that he did not want to do. And so he was stuck. These were not decisions that he had made. These were things that had been imposed upon him. Titles that had been imposed upon him. And so when I looked at him with new eyes, understanding his history, understanding who he was, I saw him not as all those terrible things, but as a child of God, reaching out, saying, "Help me." There's walls between us, but let's tear those down. Let's live together. Let's find out how to get through this. Because unlike Jesus, we can't just say you're healed, but we can join them in their pain and help them through this. And we too have our own past, our own pains, that we have put up our walls against other people and said, "Stay out." But we too need to tear down our walls and say, "Help me." We need to say, "I can't do this alone." And so we have to climb over those walls in order to tear them. We have to go to those populations, to those people that we're afraid of, those people that we have deemed as sinners, those people that we have deemed as dirty or broken or simply bad people. And we have to reach out. And we have to be willing to see their faith, to see them as who they are, which are children of God. So where are those walls in our society? Maybe it's things based on gender, or based on faiths, or based on religion, or based on sexual preferences, or based on immigration status. What are those walls? Who are those people that we deemed as bad, but don't even know them? Have never even invited them to our homes, have never had a conversation. Where are those walls? And are we going to allow Christ to tear them down? Or are we going to build them up? We have that choice. We can tear down these walls. We can invite Christ to go with us. We, like Christ, can go to these areas that we're not supposed to go, meet people who we're not supposed to meet, and change in ways that we're not supposed to change. And so this hymn that we're about to sing, this hymn is called Christ Has Broken Down the Wall. And together we will sing that Christ has already broken down the wall. But for various reasons we've decided to build it back up. And so we will continue on to sing that Christ loves us where we are. Christ loves us as we are. And during that hymn, the altar rails will be open if you would like to come and pray, or if you'd like to come and maybe sing the song as a prayer. But I warn you that the last verse says, we will break down these walls. The final verse is a call to action. And so if we're not ready to do that, then perhaps we shouldn't sing that last verse. Perhaps you should just remain seated and allow your brothers and sisters to sing that for you. But if you are able, and you are willing to leave this place and work to break down walls, then as you are able now, I invite you to rise. I invite you to rise with me and sing that hymn which says that Christ has broken down the wall. And if you're daring enough, sing the final verse that says, we will break down this wall.